Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Got to start off with the evidently Canada is leading the global uprising to crush tyrannical government. The peasants are revolting. That was the message today from the right-wing bloviators all over conservative media. And if anything, what we're seeing is what you would call an unpopular uprising, cheered on by the billionaires here in this country and American conservative corporate media. That's what we're seeing. And I'll tell you, it's been really interesting watching conservatives tie themselves in knots. And all of the right-wing mouthpieces are jumping on the Canadian trucker convoy bandwagon. They're there, man. Got their trucker hats on, got a big wad of chew in their mouth. Man, they're heading down the road. Oh, half these idiots couldn't keep it between the lines and out of the ditches. But hey, it doesn't matter. But this is one of those weird moments where maybe it's simply just a Pavlovian response. The truckers rally for freedom. Maybe it was that freedom word, the one they clearly don't understand. That maybe that's what got them all worked up. Maybe that's it, or maybe it was something more nefarious. Maybe it was something worse. Because here's my problem. Here's my problem with the right wing, now going, you shut her down. You go, truckers. In fact, let's start one here where there isn't a mandate for truck drivers. Because remember, this is about the vaccine mandate. Understand, from the beginning, that's what we were told. It's about the vaccine mandate. They're pushing back against vaccine mandate. And almost immediately, probably even before immediately, it became all of the other right-wing lunacy that you see, complete with Nazi flags and Confederate flags. And, of course, the former guy flags. So you kind of go, wait a second, it seems like there's something behind, there's money behind this. And, of course, there were the grifters who were there to sell the T-shirts because, hey, you got a popular uprising, you got to make money off of it. Good American capitalism. But remember, these were the same people. These were the same people who were losing their ever-loving freaking minds when Black Lives Matter protesters were blocking a road. They were claiming, we need security. We're worried about emergencies. They were the ones out there promoting and encouraging drivers to run these people down in the streets. And when the truck did on the bridge, they cheered it. And now, all of a sudden, the tyrannical government's going to come and clear a path. They were calling for it. Had Trump had his way, you would have seen, people beaten in the streets in places like Minnesota, in states like Minnesota and in Illinois and in Washington. You would have seen them literally, had those states said, no, please, Mr. President, come in and help. You would have seen chaos, because that's what these people are. And the weird thing is, I had this conversation today. Someone who questioned my loyalties to workers' struggles and workers' strikes and the right to protest and seek redress of grievances. And I've said from the beginning, I support people's right to protest. I support their right to protest. I support their right to be there. I support their right to have their grievances heard. But there's a point. There is a point where everybody else has a say too. You don't get a minority group, a very small minority, to come and stop everything. As someone who has been on strike before, as someone who has participated in rallies and protests, when they say move, you've got two choices. You move or they round you up and they arrest you. And that's how the game is played. And if you're going to play in that arena, if you're going to say, I'm going to put myself and my body on the line, you've got to be prepared for the consequences that come with that. And one of the consequences of protest in this country and in Canada, eventually they're going to move you along and you're going to get arrested. It's going to happen. And that's how the game is played. And what's interesting is listening to the privilege of the white folk here. And I don't usually invoke the white privilege thing ever. As an old white guy, I never. This just reeks of it. They're literally setting up camping grounds all over in Canada. Going, no, we're living here. Because there's no fear of what could come. And look, maybe it will, maybe it won't. Here's the important part of this, though. This is a minority uprising. I know the American media has spun this into, oh my gosh, all of Canada's in revolt. Reality check. The people who live in Ottawa, you know, where the little thing is, 91% of them who are 18 and older are actually vaccinated. So not only 9% aren't. 83% if you count everyone, and those are the children under 5. People who can't do it for medical reasons, whatever. The country as a whole, ahead of us, Canada has about a little over 81% of the country is vaccinated. So you have 81% of the people who are vaccinated going, explain to me why not? You know, you're the ones holding us back. You're the ones holding us behind. Now, interestingly enough, the polling on who supports these truckers and supports them, the quote-unquote freedom fighters, 32% of Canadians support them. 62% do not. And at some point, the politicians who have to figure out what you're going to do. And look, I'll tell you, I think they've given a lot longer than I think they should have. They've given time a lot longer, especially with the popular support behind them. Now, what happens as you start moving people out, that becomes an interesting scenario. And you quite possibly could have those change, but I doubt it. Because in Canada, unlike here, the Canadians have basically, you know, the polling shows they're okay with the masks and the vaccine mandates. They want to get through it. They know the few tools we have in the toolbox to help us get through it. That's what we got, and that's what we've got to use. They get it. And the weird thing is even with, you know, the gazillion truck drivers they claim are there, 250,000 trucks. 250,000 trucks. There are only 120,000 trucks who participate in cross-border trucking, which is where this is really kind of flaming from. But overall, you know, 85% of the truck drivers in that country are vaccinated. 85%. So again, our media is framing this as, you know, it's the whole trucking industry. There are hundreds of thousands of trucks, 250,000 trucks. No, they're not that many. There are a couple of thousand, yeah. You know, it's a big protest. They've found each other. The fringe has found each other. And I know when we look in the rearview mirror at this, you're going to look at the moneyed interests who are behind this. Now, according to the Canadian Trucking Alliance, they say only 16,000 people would have been affected by the cross-border trucking issue, by the restriction on if you're not vaccinated, you can't go across the border. Now you've got the premier of Ontario, this Doug Ford, where the Ambassador Bridge is closed down. He's saying, yeah, it's time. We're going to start moving people along. And he's talking about fines up to 100,000 Canadian dollars, which would be about 79,000 American dollars, and jail time. You know this is coming. You know this is coming down the road, and now you're going to separate the true zealots from the people who just bought the T-shirt. Because this now means you're really in it. And as I said, these are not the majority. Our right-wing talk radio millionaires and the Fox News multimillionaires, they want to frame this as it's a popular uprising. We need one here. And they're not. They're not the majority, and their audience isn't even the majority. This is the weird part of all of this. And the angering part, because they're calling for that kind of chaos here, because these are chaos people. These are people who know that if they can cause the same kind of disruption in supply chains, because aren't we having enough trouble already with our supply chains? No. Let's have a popular uprising to block up major cities and ports and all things with anti-vax truckers. That's what it's about. Now, I hope they do. There's part of me going, by all means, booger up the Super Bowl geniuses. Start your little convoy right there at the Super Bowl and booger that up. Because, boy, that's going to really help you with popular support. Now, for new listeners, our friends in Chicago, Minneapolis, Columbus, Atlanta, thank you for tuning in, by the way. Understand how my thought process works in any of this stuff. It's always a combination of the Roman statesman Cicero and Watergate's deep throat. Yes, both sides. Cui bono. To whose advantage or benefit? Who does this benefit? Who does this uprising, who does this unpopular uprising benefit? And then follow the money. Who's cashing in? They go hand in hand. They're right together. And it all comes back to the same corporate elites, the same extreme conservative / libertarian / anarchist corporatists who are controlling the mainstream media on the right, and the chaos merchants. These are people who, on both sides of the border, in Canada and the U.S., who just want to tear down government. It's another one of those things. See, government doesn't work. Government's tyrannical. Government's bad. But you know what you never see from these people? Never. And I've never seen a Fox News person or a right-wing talk show host say, you know what? I supported those workers at Kellogg's. I supported those workers at John Deere. I support those workers down in Alabama who want to vote for a union at Amazon, or the miners who are on strike at Warrior Met Coal. No, you never. Have you ever heard one of them ever support a workers' strike? No, of course not. It's kind of curious why they're supporting this. Because it's about the money. It's about the power. It's about tearing down those things. Because they know there are two choices. You have government of, for, and by we the people. And look, I'm in favor of them having their protests, having their grievances heard, and taking it to the people if you want a populist uprising, you do it at the ballot box. They know they can't win at the ballot box, so what they have to do is cause chaos and pain for everyone. Or there's the corporatist model, the authoritarian model. Everything done in a smoky back room and dictated. That's what they want. And, you follow the money. I've been interested in watching the comments today. Because, again, following the money. Follow the moneyed interests. You're seeing messages from the right and some on the left, some actual people that I respect, who are saying, we'll show you dirty truckers. We'll automate. And then you'll be lucky to dig ditches. This is where the industry wants to go. This is where the moneyed interests want to be. Because they know that we have as a country, we have a negative view of automated trucks. We do. Because do you really want an 80,000-pound vehicle careening down the road with no driver in it, running on a software rail when most of us can't watch a YouTube video without it buffering? Of course not. But this is about pushing that because, you can just be replaced. And it's interesting how, this week, the New Jersey Department of Transportation, they have this autonomous vehicle Trenton project. We're going to start having, some buses and stuff, running people around without drivers in it. Interesting. And this is, where I then had a conversation with one of my union friends who said, well, you don't support union workers if you don't fully blow in on this. And I go, I don't agree with why they're there. I agree that they should have the right to be there until they're moved along, as any of us have that right. But you don't get to shut down everything forever. At some point, you've got to have a plan to move it into the political sphere. And they don't have that plan. This is about chaos. This is about causing as much pain and suffering and ultimately recruiting crazy people to come along. But this is an interesting moment, because as I was explaining to this friend of mine, I live in an area where I'm a couple miles from the Pennsylvania Turnpike. You can easily drive a truck, a set of doubles, triples, whatever, put them on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and you can run the 226 miles across Pennsylvania from where I'm at, or the 358 from the other border, from one border of Pennsylvania all the way to the border of Ohio. You can then run across the Ohio Turnpike, through the Indiana Turnpike, and you can be in Chicago and never have to stop. And never have to have a driver swap, never have to have a driver take a break, and you don't have to pay a driver. That's the ultimate goal. And he's like, well, I thought we had railroads for that. You go, yeah, we do. And you know where we're going with them? We're going with virtual railroads. Because now we can put a convoy of trucks, as we've been doing in the Southwest for a couple of years now. We can have a convoy of trucks run across this country. We don't even need drivers for them. That's the goal. It's about the money. It's about the chaos. It's about the money. And look, the right never seems to fail in this stuff. They spend huge amounts of money to take advantage of every moment like this. They maximize it through their focus groups and their think tanks, and they come out with what benefits them. And they want us to believe that this is a worker uprising. This is a peasants' uprising, when the reality is, where were these truck drivers all of these years as they've been getting screwed out of wages, where their benefits have been cut, where they've got horrible treatment from dispatchers? Where was this kind of unity? And it wasn't there. Because this again is manufactured. This again is pushed for moneyed interests. Are there some? Sure, there are some. But I say this is something that's pushed heavily from above. Got a lot to get to, a lot to talk about. Also, your thoughts. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1981. That was the day at least 8 workers at the Sequoia 1 nuclear reactor in Tennessee were exposed to radioactive coolant. The reactor was part of the vast Tennessee Valley Authority that provided electrical power to the region. Sequoia 1 had just been commissioned and was already off to a bad start. First, on January 19, 1981, a generator tube malfunctioned, forcing a complete shutdown. Then, on this day, an operator's error triggered an emergency alert. An auxiliary unit operator was working his first day on the new job without proper training. He inadvertently opened the wrong valve during a safety test. The operator misunderstood his instructions and recognized his mistake immediately. But when he tried to alert the control room, they were too busy responding to the developing crisis to answer his call. Reactor water sprayed for 10 minutes before it was finally shut off. As many as 14 workers were contaminated by the coolant. Some scientists contend that the release of reactor vessel water was inadvertent and part of the design of the cooling system. Others argue that, in order to cut costs, management had decided to use radioactively contaminated water as emergency coolant rather than the more expensive, fresh, uncontaminated water. Steam leaks, tube malfunctions, and overflowing drainage tanks were just some of the reported failures at the plant in the following years. Between 1985 and 1988, Sequoia was forced to shut down again after an independent review concluded that the plant did not comply with current safety standards. Today, the plant supplies electricity to more than 1.3 million homes. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the program, you're just joining us, you can always get the podcast. Don't fret. It's always there for you. Just go to thericksmithshow.com and find your favorite podcast host and have it wherever you go. Now, in talking about uprisings and talking about movements, as I've been saying, look, I think the trucker thing, great. Have your moment, express yourself. That's part of the American way, and I think part of the Canadian way as well. Redress of grievances. Hey, you take it to the Capitol. I'm all in favor of it until you start causing other people all kinds of pain and misery, and then have this weird, bizarre, almost immediate, insane turn. Because it's no longer about the vaccines. It's about everything else on the right fringe. But I am in favor of, you got your moment, which is why I'm thrilled to hear that the Poor People's Campaign is in the beginning stages of pushing, a march to Washington here this summer to push the agenda of low-wage workers and people in poverty, which about time we start doing much, much more. And that's why I have asked the Reverend Carolyn Foster to come talk with us. Reverend Foster is the head person there at the Faith and Community. He's the Faith and Community Coordinator for the Birmingham Ministries and the Tri-Chair for the Alabama Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. I will get it all out. Reverend Foster, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you. I know that's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, especially when I'm not very good at this to begin with. Let's start with this revival. We're in a moment, I've been saying for a while with President Biden, that it's kind of I'm hoping for a reset, rebuild some of our social safety net, return reward to work, start caring about communities and our neighbors again. And this seems kind of like a perfect match to where I'd like to see us go. Can you tell me what you guys are doing?
Yes, we are so excited. On Monday, the Alabama Poor People's Campaign, in partnership with our other colleagues in Georgia, Mississippi, Florida, and Tennessee, will be hosting a national live stream of the National Poor People's Campaign. We're calling it a mobilizing tour because we are, as you said, pushing people toward Washington, D.C. for a mass poor people's and low-wage workers assembly and moral march on Washington and to the polls. And that event will happen on June 18th, 2022 of this year.
So we got a little something to look forward to over the summer. But on Monday, February the 14th, you're launching from, as you said, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Florida, and Tennessee. And those are virtual events, or are those in-person events?
Yeah, originally we wanted it to be in person, but Alabama's COVID rate is just so high. And so we are going to have it virtually. It will be broadcast live on the poorpeoplescampaign.org website and Facebook page, beginning at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. We invite everyone to I know it's Valentine's Day, but bring your loved one and let's watch together.
Well, you could say the whole community, in love with the whole community.
There you go. That's right.
Now, I got to tell you, I'm a little fed up with virtual anything at this point, and I know a lot of us are chomping at the bit to get back to some semblance of normalcy to where we can have these things in person. But this is a start, right?
This is a start, and I think it'll be worth your while, because what you'll hear is, we have 140 million people who are poor and low wage in this country. In Alabama, which is my hometown, 45% of our population, that's almost half of our population, live in poverty. And it's time for us to raise those kinds of issues and to advocate on behalf of those issues with poor people leading the way. And so that's what this mass meeting, this moral march on Washington is all about. So here in Alabama, we are excited to be able to host this first launch, this first mobilizing tour to lead people to DC in June.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with the Reverend Carolyn Foster. She is the Faith in Community Coordinator for the Greater Birmingham Ministries, also the Tri-Chair for the Alabama Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. You want to check out the website, poorpeoplescampaign.org. If you want to go to see the live stream on Monday, /live stream, we'll get links out on social media how you can do that. So what's the marching order? What are we looking to accomplish through all this? As you said, 45% of the people in Alabama live below the poverty line. But we just ripped away $250 a month per child from families here back in January 15th, because we've got a senator from West Virginia, another very poor state, who said that poor people are just going to waste it, Reverend. They're just going to spend it on booze and on drugs. They're going to waste it. We can't help poor people. They've got to help themselves.
Oh, haven't we heard that all before? But that's why we are encouraging people to show up in mass in DC in June, because we want to change that narrative. At this mobilizing tour, the first one on Monday, you will hear from poor and low income people. You will hear their own stories. You will hear faith leaders from around our state and our region, and is to amplify their voices so that we can change and shift the narrative. The narrative that you just talked about is what we hear all the time. How many times do people intentionally listen to people who are poor and low wage? We want to blame the poor for being poor, but it's not about personal choice at all. It's about policy choice. Policies keep people poor. And so we want to change that. We want to elevate that. And that is why it is so important for all of us to come together so that we can change the narrative.
So what are we looking for out of this? What's the policy shifts that we're talking about? I go back to reading some of the history of A. Philip Randolph, who was against the idea of welfare. He wanted jobs programs. And I, as a kid growing up in a housing project where my mother and I were on welfare numerous times, and do remember the end of the month not having food, because this is why I think it was so cruel what we did to families in this country for several months. We gave them a little bit of resource to make sure that the cupboards were full at the end of the month, only to rip it out from under them. And show them what was possible. Like, oh, I'm sorry, no more for you. What's the policy we're moving towards?
Well, let me give you an example of what's been happening here in Alabama. In Birmingham several years ago, we worked with our city council, organized here and worked with our city council to have minimum wage raised at that time, at least to $10.10 an hour. And the city council approved it. The ink wasn't even dry on the document when our state legislators quickly passed a bill nullifying the whole thing. That's what I mean about policy change. So poverty issues is not personal. It's about these policy issues. So we want to wake up our state legislators by showing up in mass. If we can, I mentioned we had 140 million poor and low wealth people. If we were to all show up in DC in June, they would have to hear us. And that's what we are trying to change. That is get those policies changed that affect 140 million people, and to get them out to the polls.
See, that's where I was going to go. That's where I was going to go, Reverend.
Yes, we got to vote.
I was going to go, November is really the important mobilization time. We need to get people marching to the voting polls and throwing these bums out on both sides of the aisle. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of blame to go around all across the political spectrum. From the neoliberals who brought us horrible trade policies to the cons who brought us, tax policy that enriched the wealthy at the expense of the rest of us. There's a lot of blame, and we need poor people running for office.
Exactly. And we are doing that and empowering. We say we must do more. And more for us stands for mobilize, organize, register, and engage, empower, and get them to the polls. So that is what we're all about. You're absolutely right. No, that is no doubt in my mind why there are so many voter suppression laws all over this country right now, because they are afraid of what poor and low wealth people, the power that we really have. So there is power power in voting.
No, yeah, which is why they're working so hard to, as you pointed out, to block us from doing that. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Reverend Carolyn Foster. She's the chief cook and bottle washer over at the Greater Birmingham Ministries. We're going to go that route. Also, tri-chair of the Alabama Poor People's Campaign. You want to check out the website and the work that they're doing, poorpeoplescampaign.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. If you got a thought, a question, comment, something you on your mind here for Reverend Foster, give us a yell, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Now, in looking at the policies, you brought up the minimum wage thing. A lot of states have these preemption laws, which I find I find literally hysterical. Because, the people who are pushing them are the very ones who tell us that they don't believe in government, big government, and overreaching big government. But yet, boy, will they go into a local community and say, no, you can't raise wages for people. You can't make people's lives better. You can only make them worse. I find that interesting.
Yeah, it's such a hypocrisy. It really is. And I like what you said about getting poor and low income people in those positions of authority. So that is one of our goals at Greater Birmingham Ministries. Actually, we nurture low income people. We train them how to become speakers, how to go and advocate on behalf of themselves. And that is the whole goal, in my opinion, is to get them in positions of influence. They have the grasp for work. They know what it's like to live in poverty. I too grew up in the housing project. So I know exactly what you're saying, Rick.
No, and this is why you need to have people who understand, with the walk a mile in my shoes thing. You need to have people in those halls of power who, when Joe Manchin speaks up, when the wealthy Joe Manchin is able to speak up, someone is able to go, hey, wait a second. No, I don't think you know what you're talking about. Let me educate you. Let me explain to you what reality is. And not in a public way, but in a way of, hey, I think you need to tone this down a bit. And life experiences matter. And I think for policymakers, you need that breadth of understanding and experience before you can rule over other people's lives.
Yes, you're so right. And so it is so important for us to have poor and low income people be the speakers. We at the Poor People's Campaign do not invite the legislators or elected officials to the microphone. They don't get the microphone. It is the folk who are directly impacted by these issues that can lift up those stories and tell the truth about those stories.
Now, for me, and this is where I would love to see an uprising around. I've never been a big one for handout programs. Back when Clinton went through the we're going to change welfare as we know it, I was hoping it was going to go into we're going to be the employer of last resorts. We're going to give people the dignity and respect of a job. And if the private sector can't, or more likely won't create enough jobs, we're going to make sure everyone who wants one gets one that pays a living wage that they can support their family on, have dignity in, give them health security, retirement security, so that they have a future. I would have preferred to see that. So that we all are working people. We're all working class folks. We should all be moving together. And yet I don't see anybody talking in those terms. And I think that if we could get by that, I think we could get a mass mobilization to push us in that direction. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that we are working towards that for sure. You mentioned healthcare. Here in Alabama, our state has refused to expand Medicaid. And most of the time, people who are poor and low income in this state, and I would suspect all over the country, is because of medical debt. I know people who have waited to the last minute to go to the doctor or go to the emergency room for a health issue and have waited too long because they did not have health insurance. A simple expanding of Medicaid will create people staying healthy, going to the doctors for regular checkup, and being able to work. And so when you can't work because you're sick, it just keeps people, again, locked in poor and low income positions. So it is so important to empower people, give them what they need. It's not about a handout, in my opinion, it's about a hand up. You talked about dignity, and that is so important, to give people a dignity in their wages, healthcare, all the things that is a human right, really, in this country. This country is the richest country in the whole world, and there should not be 140 million people who are poor in this country.
Yeah, we're the wealthiest country in the world, in the world at its wealthiest moment in history.
Yes.
There is no reason why we should have homeless people, while we should have kids going to bed hungry at night. There's no reason for it other than the choices we make and the budgets, the immoral budgets that we push through. That's why I'm glad that there are folks like you, Reverend, out there who are pushing this in this direction, being our conscience and putting this at the front of our minds.
Thank you. You know, our state just recently spent $140 million COVID relief dollars to planning to build two mega prisons. And we've been fighting against that. But it's a done deal. There's nothing we can do at this point. But it's those kinds of decisions that are made by people who are clueless at the top.
Yeah,
clueless.
well, I'll tell you, I'm not horribly against the idea of building prisons as long as we're locking the Trump administration up. I'm okay with it. I think that's not a bad idea because there's a lot of criming going on there. So last question I've got for you, and you don't have to join in with that. I didn't mean to put you on the spot with that. But my last question, outside of Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Florida, Tennessee, how do the rest of us get involved in this?
Yeah, now everybody can get involved with this. You just go to the poorpeoplescampaign.org, and you'll see a place where you can register to be a active member or just a member on the sideline, however you want to become a part. The Poor People's Campaign is not an organization, but a movement, similar to what you would have experienced in the 60s with the civil rights movement. So we want everyone who care about systemic racism, systemic poverty, the war economy, ecological devastation, and helping to change this immoral narrative of white supremacy to join this movement. And once we host this mobilization tour on Monday, we'll be moving to, we've got these other states. We've got Florida. I mentioned that this is a part of the southern region, but we'll also be going to Ohio, New York, Wisconsin, North Carolina, California, pretty much covering the whole country.
Good.
And so there's all kinds of ways you can get involved. Just
Beautiful.
Go to the website.
Reverend, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Really great talking with you. I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts here in the future.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Great stuff, Reverend Carolyn Foster, Faith and Community Coordinator at the Greater Birmingham Ministries, also the Tri-Chair of the Alabama Poor People's Campaign. Check out their website, poorpeoplescampaign.org. We'll get links out on social media, how you can do that. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. That was the day that workers in Oxnard, California, took a united stand and showed the power of solidarity. Oxnard was a California boom town. The American Beet Sugar Company, owned by the Oxnard brothers, drew hundreds of workers to the area. These new arrivals included Mexican and Chinese agricultural workers who faced hostility from local white residents. The managers at Oxnard exploited this interracial tension. They intentionally exacerbated conflicts between the groups of workers in an effort to keep wages low. This animosity heightened even further when the federal government passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, severely restricting Chinese immigration to the United States. As the number of Chinese workers at the factory fell, the company recruited Japanese workers to take their place. They wanted to continue to divide and exploit their workforce. They required their employees to shop at a company store. They also paid their recruits less than was originally promised. But the company had miscalculated. The workers were fed up with these tactics. 500 Japanese workers and 200 Mexican workers walked off the job. Soon the number of striking workers had grown to more than 1,000. One Mexican worker was killed during the work action, and 4 other strikers were injured. But the workers stood strong together. The company eventually caved to the demands of the workers. The victorious workers then applied for union affiliation with the American Federation of Labor. But the AFL refused to admit the new local because it included Japanese workers. It would take a few more decades before the lesson of solidarity taught in Oxnard, California, would begin to be embraced by the U.S. labor movement. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm going to make a mental apology. I'm mentally apologizing to Maggie Haberman. I'm generally not a huge fan. Just it is what it is. And look, I didn't weigh in on the show on her coming out with the information about Trump flushing things down the toilet. I didn't say it. I didn't put anything out on Twitter. I didn't do anything. For what it's worth, I said nothing. I did nothing. I thought it. So my subconscious is really sorry because, I was going, why didn't you come out with this when you were supposed to, when it happened? Well, she's saying she just recently found out and she's come out with it now because her book isn't coming out for another 8 months. So if that's true, I'm sorry. But now we do know that that comment about flushing the toilet 10, 15 times, now we kind of understand it. But like I said yesterday, thought he was just eating too many cheeseburgers and, who knows. But yeah, now we know. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the cheeseburger gate or flush gate or however we're going to gate this one. I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney, to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So Flusher Gate, let's go with that. I think I'm going to go with Flusher Gate. Do you remember when he came out with that? We're looking at sinks and showers and all that nonsense.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Do you remember when he came out with that statement, when Trump came out with the statement a couple of years ago about how they're looking at sinks and showers and the toilets that you got to flush 10 or 15 times?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I'm flush with comments on this one. Yes.
All right.
I know.
I see how you are here.
Right.
But this is a problem, isn't it?
Well, sure it is. I mean, he's denying he destroyed or flushed papers or documents. We know he ripped items up. We know, by the way, from a news revelation from his own staff, that the staffer said, look, there's documents in these boxes. Do not have staff look at these documents. It's classified information. Also, as I said the other night on your show, it depends on what they took to Mar-a-Lago, and we know that some of it was the Kim Jong-un personal communications. I mean, there's a clear Records Act. There's a clear Archiving Act. And the reason this has been found, by the way, when these things occur, they're in a computer system, and then eventually, Rick, the archives acquires that information from the computer, and then they painstakingly say, okay, the computer said this file was logged or generated. Where is it? So they knew then what was not delivered and should have been. This wasn't guesswork, because somebody said, well, this is just guesswork. No, they actually know.
Okay, so there's a record of what should be there. So if he really did flush, 10, 15 times, things down the toilet, which is what the Haberman book is supposedly saying, and that they had to have people come and unclog them, this could be big deal, because the National Archives and Records Administration is right now asking the Justice Department to look into this.
Right, they are, because, again, this is not something where you may pass the records on. It's where you shall do it. It's a clear act. There's two parts to this. There's the archives and then the record information section. And again, just to clarify this, and this is a dead horse that needs to be beaten when people say, well, they're just making false stories. They know from the computers when people log, everything into the White House, then eventually that system's turned over, and they can see on February the 4th, this came, Kim Jong-un letters, whatever, and then they go back and say, where is that particular item? And so that's how they know. They know exactly what's not in their possession.
I had a caller yesterday who asked, do I believe that Trump will be held accountable for any of the things that we're coming out with? And I said from the beginning, and I'm going to stick with it. No. We don't lock presidents up. We haven't. That's not been our history.
Right.
I think we're going to continue that. Given all of that we're finding out and all of the information coming out, do you agree with me, or do you think there's a potential that he could see some kind of repercussion?
Oh, as soon as you were talking, I talked above you a little bit. I said no. I threw that in right away, even before you finished your sentence. Okay. I'm with you. Because it's not going to happen. The Justice Department is not going to say you should have done this and now we're going to hold you accountable. And, I don't know whether we like it or not, if it were other entities withholding information, they probably would have at least a fine, something. But it's the president, and I just don't think it's going to happen.
Now, even if they find that he did flush this stuff, I mean, because that's an overt act of destruction. Just in a heat of a moment, say, I was mad, I ripped it up. Yeah, but I knew they were going to tape it back together. The act of flushing it down the toilet, I mean, something's got a slap on the wrist, take away a bowl of ice cream. I mean, something.
I mean, if it had been, if it was shredded, it would be bad, but it would sound better. I mean, you don't flush sensitive things. I shredded it. We thought it was useless, but I flushed it down the toilet. Why?
Yeah.
Everybody also knows it clogs toilets.
Well, evidently not everybody.
Well, yeah. Now he knows.
Evidently not. Let's move along. Have you noticed we're lifting a lot of mask mandates here over the last couple of days? It seems like Democrats have been reading some of the polls. So let me pose it this way. Are Democrats looking at the polls, or do you think that they're looking at the science and saying, hey, everything's coming down, all of the infection rates are coming down, so we're heading into a clear space? How do you see this?
Let me answer this two ways. One, first of all, information was coming out, including Dr. Fauci himself. And the information coming out from Fauci and others that was beginning to, be accessed said in certain situations then the mask mandates in the schools they felt could be loosened. So that came out. Now, at the same time, of course, somebody was doing polling. So let me throw the second part in here. You've got a sitting governor. Now, this happens to be blue states. They're picking that out. So you've got a sitting governor. Their people, their health people, every hour read everything before the governor does. That's the way it works. And then they notify the governors that, Dr. Fauci and other scientists are saying, wait a minute, we can reassess, the whole mask situation. We recommended it one time. Now the science tells us something different. And then polling comes in. And here, I'll throw this out here. What is wrong with them saying, oh, okay, here's how the public also feels? And then they make the decision between the science and, the polling can be looked at. It's not, I don't think, it's where a poll came in and they said, oh, there we go, 51% said this, so we're going to do it. I think the polling has some influence, but I don't think it was strictly based on polling. I don't believe it was.
Yeah, I mean, you listen to the bloviators on the right, and it's it's this nefarious plot to claim victory. I'm going, it's not claiming victory. It's we're taking the information that's available at this moment and assessing it to the moment, so that we're able to make informed choices about how we proceed forward with the best technology and the best options we have. There's no black and white, and this is my problem with black and white thinking.
Mm-hmm. It's a combination. Like I said, it's a combination. They saw science. They saw what the public was thinking. Now, sometimes political people, make a decision contrary to what is said in polls. When this all began, if we'd have looked at the polling, everybody in the country would have probably said, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to do anything. There's nothing wrong. But governors like my governor, Mike DeWine, said, wait a minute, I think something's wrong. And so they went against, the polling. And so that happens. But I just don't believe that, 4 polls came out, and then they were laid on the desks of these governors. They said, oops, okay, well, we're going to change it today based on it. I know that articles came out from Dr. Fauci and other scientists simultaneously, and of course, be honest with you, probably somebody did a poll based on what they saw Fauci saying.
Yeah, look, and a lot of things are going to change over the next couple of weeks and months,
Right.
and it's hopefully we get through this. I fear we're in for another spike soon. I do agree with the president. Maybe it's a little premature to go, hey, it's over. Don't worry about it. Go on. Go do your things. But we'll see. We'll see how this plays out.
Right.
Let's move along. Should Democrats be draining the swamp?
Well, on this one, it's a sort of drain. I think as we look at this whole issue of the stocks and the purchasing the stocks and members being able to do that, or spouses or staff, I think they're going to have to do something on it. I know the speaker, changed some direction, and she's responding to her members. So I do want to mention when I did 60 Minutes, I think about 9 years ago, Leslie Stahl, before the taping started, off the record, point blank asked me about this. At the time, Boehner was speaker, and she asked me about it. And I was, very frank with her that, well, first of all, I didn't have stock. But I was also very frank with her. Have I heard things in meetings about, boy, that stock's going to jump? Yes, I have. Do I know that member winked and nodded and told, his best friend who told his stockbroker? I don't know. I can't say that I have that chain of evidence. But did I hear people say things? Sure. And at that time, 9 years ago, 60 Minutes was on that thing. I thought it was going to happen a lot sooner. I think something is going to happen. And I think, that they're okay to do this. Now, the one thing I would, if I was being paid to advise them, make sure you decide how you're going to do this, how you're going to move it through. Don't move something through that you're all going to fight about, and don't move something through that's a tiny little smack on the hand. If you're going to do it, then make sure you build some walls so that people feel comfortable that members are not engaging in inside information.
Yeah, it's got to be something, because I got an email today. There are 75 lawmakers who've benefited off of off the pandemic, and here are the stocks that they bought, and it was basically soliciting money to go, hey, we got to push for this. But it was about them getting money to run their organization. And I'm going, this is, like you said, something that should have been done a long time ago. And one of my responses has always been, I think the only way you can do that is, any of their trades, the second that they make that trade, they have to be reported. So that at least the rest of us get the opportunity to get in on insider information.
Exactly. To watch what they do and then do what they do.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, isn't that kind of the? Because I don't know what that would look like. What would it look like? I mean, you hear all this stuff about blind trusts. Mm-hmm. You go, okay, well, it's a blind trust, but who's to say that it's not, like you said, a wink and a nod to a friend or a coworker or whatever? How would you regulate this?
Well, I think that the penalty, if they're caught, has to be raised. I think the reporting mechanisms would have to be raised, and I think you've got to bring in the stockbroker company or entity that does this for members, because, again, as I told Leslie Stahl at the time, I did not see, active evidence where a member told a staffer who called up a friend that called up the broker's cousin who called the broker and they bought. I didn't see that happen. Could it happen? Yes. That whole scenario could happen. So I think that you've got to make the penalties also appropriate for the broker entity, so it does not act on tips where somebody calls and says, hey, by the way, I'm from Congressman so-and-so's office. And at that point in time, the stockbroker says, let me hang up on you, okay?
There you go. That's exactly
right.
It. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Bob Ney, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst. If you're just joining us, if you've missed any of the program, download the podcast. You can get that at our website, thericksmithshow.com, or any podcast hosting site. Make sure you have that wherever you go. Share with your friends. Like, subscribe, all of that stuff. So I want to move on to that. legitimate political discourse comment seems to be actually, rubbing some feathers on the Republican side to where there's almost something of a rift going on.
Well, there's a huge rift. You've got Mitch McConnell, of course, on one side, the Republican National Committee, and a couple of Republican House members, which we know, one of them is Cheney, obviously. That's the most famous name. And that Republican rift is quite huge. Now, of course, the media are asking Republican senators, are you going to vote for Mitch McConnell? Because that's the next step once you get into all this. Yeah. Trump came out and called him a rhino, and Republicans don't go along with Trump are rhinos. And so they've started this. As I have said over and over in the last 4 weeks, there's about 8 ways, if you combine 6 of them under the Democrats' control, that they can take the House and keep it, and the Senate and keep it. And there's 2 ways that the Republicans can do a couple of things to help the Democrats keep it. And one of them is to do exactly what they're doing, which is relive the last election and go ahead and start a political firing squad and, on each other.
Yep.
And that's what they're doing. And McConnell, is not going to stand there and say these were selfies and tourists that were in the Capitol that day. And also the Republican National Committee, as McConnell points out, has no business making particular comments on that. And, of course, Trump took him to task. So, what's McConnell going to do? McConnell's in it for the long haul. McCarthy, who wants to be Speaker, that's a different world. He can't even be bold enough, quote, to make the statement McConnell did. Because he's on the line if the House rolls over. McCarthy is going to struggle, like a fish out of water trying to be Speaker. McConnell's in for the long haul.
No, you're right. But what's interesting to me is, I'm glad the Republicans are like this. The Daily Beast had a story that quoted 4 longtime Republican operatives who are saying that in competitive Republican races, they are seeking Marjorie Taylor Greene's endorsement. And I'm going, that's I think a way for Democrats to win House seats, putting her out in front more often.
Well, that was my second point of the 8 points that I make of how the House can be retained by the Democrats. And the number 8, or the number 7, was go ahead and get crazy candidates, or get candidates that the crazies, make crazier.
Yep.
Go ahead and do that. That will not help. And you can go down a whole history of times the Republicans have had a chance and they got the wrong candidate.
Gazpacho, Bob. Gazpacho.
With gazpacho, right? Cold gazpacho.
What fun. But, Bob, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you.
You too. Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Seriously, if I'm running a campaign, I'm not seeking her endorsement. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, get the app on your smartphone. Take that everywhere you go. It's Black History Month. We are doing a special series of podcasts specifically for Black History Month. Make sure you seek those out. Just subscribe to the podcast. You'll get everything. It'll be all right there for you. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, your thoughts, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Did you work a 40-hour work week this week? If you did, this is an important day for you. On this day in labor history, the year was 1926. And on this day, labor leader Benjamin Gold began what became a general strike of all furriers in New York City. Benjamin Gold was born in Russia and immigrated with his family to the United States when he was 12 years old. He worked at several jobs before entering work in the fur industry. He became active in the Furrier Union at only 14 years old. In 1926, Gold helped lead some 12,000 workers, including Jewish, Greek, and African-American furriers, on strike. One of their core demands was a 40-hour work week. Despite numerous acts of police brutality against the workers, constant red baiting, and dwindling strike funds, the workers held strong. Ben Gold helped raise money for the strikers, visiting other union halls throughout the city to sell 40-hour Liberty bonds. He helped get the New York State Federation of Labor and other unions in the city to support the cause. He argued that the 40-hour work week was important for all workers in New York and across the nation. With this support, Gold organized a rally at Madison Square Garden. The labor supporters filled the garden, making it the largest labor meeting in New York up to that time. After 17 long weeks, the furriers were successful, winning their first contract that recognized a 40-hour, 5-day work week. They also won a 25% pay increase, union inspection of shops, an employer contribution to an unemployment insurance fund, a paid day off, and equal assignments of work without favoritism. These brave workers helped to set the standard for the work week of today. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
One 416 Rick 1-866-416-7425. You got a thought, a question, comment, something on your mind? Love to hear it. I'm in one of these kind of weird kind of moments right now. In that, I'm looking at what's going on with the Republicans in our House and in the Senate. Who in their right mind would seek the endorsement of Marjorie Taylor Greene? Seriously. I mean, the gazpacho aside, it's all of the other insanity. And again, I say Democrats, you made a huge mistake. You should have never done the dirty laundry work for the Republicans. You should have hung her right around their neck where they should be. Also, a Republican lawmaker, he's been fined $125,000 for misusing donor money and, well, not reporting it. Reporting violations, as they've put it. I got to wonder how much that went into the pocket. Also, three donors, three former executives of a Hawaiian-based American defense contractor, they were indicted over the allegations of unlawful campaign contributions to Susan Collins and her political action committee. And again, this is one of those things where you keep going back and you go, we got to get the money out of politics. Because here's the thing, she reaped the benefits of criminal activity. She was able to have resources her opponent didn't have through criminal acts, and there's no way to hold her accountable now because it's after the fact. Too late. Oops, sorry. And that was a close race. And you got to wonder how many other, secret criminal, under the table kind of donations went into that race. Which is why we need publicly financed elections. Look, you want to give money to political campaigns that goes into a big pot, everybody gets the same amount, and you run your campaign based on ideas, based on organizing capacity, and based on volunteers coming and helping, and not paid volunteers, actual people who want to participate in their democracy. And then you find people who are breaking those rules and you hold them accountable. This idea, though, the one who can, cheat and get the most money and have the most ad time is ridiculous. And I know they say that, the Bloombergs of the world, it doesn't matter because at that level, it didn't. Bloomberg was just a wholly unlikable guy. He was not going to win, no matter how much money he spent. Same thing with Steyer. I like Tom Steyer. He was never going to win. But in local races, where $50,000 is the most you should be spending on a state house race, instead of $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, congressional races costing $5 to $10 million in some places, shouldn't cost that much. Which is why we don't have everyday average working class people signing up to run for office, because it's prohibitively expensive. And money takes the front seat. Ideas are in the back, which is why we never deal with the problems that we have, which is why we never talk about poverty in an actual way that we can solve it, why we never talk about issues like homelessness and hunger. We never talk about that stuff in real, tangible ways. in ways that we could fix it. Because look, we're the wealthiest freaking country in the history of civilization at its wealthiest point. The problem is the distribution. And back when the T-Twizzlers were running around in 2010, 11, and 12, screaming, "They want redistribution of wealth," I go, "Yeah, I do." That's not something you're going to hang around my neck as a negative. I do want mass redistribution of wealth. I want it redistributed the way it was when my grandparents' generation were working, where if you worked hard, you played by the rules, you got ahead, where people got jobs that they could have income security, health security, retirement security. They were able to raise their families. They were able to help the next generation get a head start. And they were able to lead their lives in dignity and with respect. Today, the reason people are so freaking angry, and I truly believe this, the reason people are so angry is we're struggling. And you look at our leaders who, I do understand when some of the right-wing nutcases go off about the mask mandates. I do get it sometimes. When you see, some of our leaders, not wearing their masks in social spaces, it does look like they're flaunting it. That does look like they don't care. Was it an oversight? Was it an accident? Maybe. But it angers people. So I kind of get it. But ultimately, it comes down to the wealth gap, the massive inequality gap. I go back to something my high school government teacher said. And it was one of these moments where, which side of the political divide are you on? Are you on the side of Democrats or Republicans? And I asked the question, how do you know which one you are? And his answer was pretty simple. It's like, are you closer to being very rich or very poor? Because understand, the Republicans are for the very wealthy and policies that will make them even wealthier. And Democrats are for the poor, or at least this is how it was back in the 80s. We're for the very poor and helping social programs to lift up the bottom so that people can do better. And for folks in the middle, you got to decide which one you're closer to, the rich or the poor, because you're going to pay for both. And we do. And I'll tell you, I don't mind paying for someone who's struggling to help get them to have the dignity and respect that they deserve. I do have a problem with funding more of corporate America and lining their pockets even more. Sorry, got a problem with that. It just is what it is. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Eric on line one. Eric, how are you?
Doing good, Rick. About yourself? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. I'm glad that it is Friday. What's on your mind, brother?
Boy, no kidding. Well, wanted to just expand on what you were saying about people being pissed off and then the Republicans. I think they're going to self-destruct because you can only go so far with the con that they're running. And I think the people that would vote for them are starting to see the con for what it is. Because what are they offering? They're offering nothing. And I think just the more extreme they get, the more people are going to wake up and say, hey, wait a minute. What are you guys actually offering? I mean, with all the power that they have on their side right now, let's think about this. They could be doing stuff for guys like you and me that actually have to get up in the morning and go to work. And they're not. They refuse to do that. I mean, it's kind of I hear people talk about, this could, the FDR moment and this and that for the Democrats. It's that way for somebody, yet they're not doing it. And they claim they're for for like family values, right? They're for the working man, yet are they trying to raise wages? No.
Not a bit.
Who do they pick? It's like with Trump. Who did he pick for his cabinet? Let's play the game of who wasn't part of Goldman Sachs on that man's cabinet. Because up where I'm at here in Minnesota, I'm kind of on the border of Trump country, and I got to tell you, at least on the street level from where I'm at, a lot of them are having a real, kind of buyer's remorse. I mean, again, I get it, because it goes into why people are pissed off. People aren't like, we may get overlooked, we may be dumb, but we're not stupid. Yeah. We see you guys getting bailed out. We see you guys on the government teat and yet making me feel like shit for getting unemployment. And then I have to go to a crappy job where I get paid poorly and then treated poorly, and you keep wanting me to do that? How about I give you the finger, and then you give me my severance check? Or maybe I'll be on the dole, like the banks are on the dole, like government contractors are on the dole, Why can't they build things that just don't, that don't go boom, right? I mean, is that all you people can do with our tax money?
Amen,
Sorry,
brother. I'm right there with you. I know for years, all the years I've been doing this, I asked the question, what has a Republican proposed legislatively that's going to make the lives of working people better, and solely the lives of working people? And in 16 and a half years of doing this, I've never had someone say, Rick, no, this is what they've done, because they've done nothing. Now, on the other side of it, Democrats have got a problem too. I'm happy with the direction Biden's going, a little upset with Manchin and Sinema. In fact, a lot upset. Because I think we could be doing much more.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where it comes back to voting and getting more working class votes in the Senate and in Congress.
No, absolutely. And I think, because the problem they're running into now is that if what you're telling me as like a Republican, you guys are going to claim things are rigged, things are fixed, things are whatnot. You're basically telling me if I vote you in, I'm never going to get rid of you. Because you're going to where does that stop? You're always going to say it's rigged. You're always going to just have, it's like a de facto dictatorship with the respectability of a quote unquote election.
Yep.
Now we turn into Hungary. Now we turn into these places that we make fun of, right?
Well, we turned into Iraq where Saddam Hussein was getting 98% of the vote.
Oh, gee, right? Surprise, surprise. But then, come on. But no, like I said, I think it's like we live in two different worlds: the world that we see on TV, and then the real world on the street. And it's that schism, right? Because hey, people are also pissed off because they see these talking heads on TV. It's like, wait a minute, that's not my reality. You have to at least in some way match what it is I'm seeing on the street. You say things are great. Yeah. Wait a minute. I'm barely able to get from Monday to Friday. What the hell do you mean things are going so great? My wages haven't gone up. You still think of me as a piece of you-know-what because I'm not a lawyer or an attorney or, something like that. No, I'm a blue-collar guy that actually makes things. Yet I can't afford to buy a house because they won't give me a loan.
It's insane. So let me ask you this. Do you think there's a way with some of the Trump supporters that to reunite the working class of this country? Is there a way for us blue collar folks, the people who punch a clock and collect a paycheck? Is there a way for us to come back to some bit of middle of the road, at least between the curbs kind of thing, if not going in the same direction? Do you see that as possible?
I actually do. And I think the key lies into just kind of what do we prioritize? Because that's the one thing that I can't stand about some of the so-called lefties. They want to make issue. Hey, look, don't get me wrong. Things are very serious. They apply to certain people, and I'm not going to deny anybody their pain. But I'm not here to dictate the Pain Olympics. I'm not here to award gold medals. For strife and struggle. Hey, well, wait a minute. What the hell is more important? We all want to, breathe clean air. We want clean water. We want to house and feed our kids, and we want safe places to live. We all can hey, I don't have to like you. You don't have to like me, but we can respect each other as human beings. And let's look at about what we've gained. And I think as long as we kind of focus on that and because the one thing that I've noticed too is that especially when you talk to some of the Trump supporters that I know, when you get past the purposeful provocativeness of what they say, you end up finding that when you get past that, then we can have a conversation. You don't get a rise. They don't get a rise out of me by saying, oh, this and that and filth and foul and whatever, so-called racist things or whatever. No, I don't care. How are we going to do this? This is the job. We know we got to do this. How are we going to do it? We got to clean the water, the roads, or let's say, something basic and fundamental and tangible that we can, get behind. That what they may try because they try to weaponize and politicize everything. But what? Roads are bad. Look at Wisconsin. My God, I remember there was a time, and I don't know how familiar you are with the upper Midwest up here, but there was a time that Wisconsin had the best damn roads, like some of the smoothest roads I've ever been on in my life. Right? Ask me if it's that way now. No. Why isn't that? There's even potholes where I'm at here in Hennepin County. Just little basic, fundamental, tangible things that, hey, we can throw money behind because they're actual assets.
Yeah.
And I think if we focus on that and then just, let what I kind of call and what some of the kids these days say the cool points just go out, hey, we can get back to that later. You know, that's not saying we have to forget it. We can get back to it later. But we need to kind of focus on what is going to affect all of us collectively, like streets, roads, schools.
We don't all have to be the prime minister of Wokistan. There are things that we can't agree with. I'm with you on that. Good stuff, Eric. I appreciate the call, man.
100%. Absolutely. Hey, take care, man. Stay safe.
Thanks so much. Call back again. I appreciate it. No, I mean, he's spot on right. And I'm hoping he's right on the being able to reunite the working class. And this is where Democrats have an opportunity, I think. I think they have an opportunity to go back to those bread and butter economic issues. Again, not forgetting all of the other things, but stop being pulled into those traps that Republicans set for them by making this the issue. You know, in Virginia, do you really think Glenn Youngkin's going to make people's lives better, going to make the lives of workers better? No, of course not. But he is going to divide. He is going to make sure that the sides never talk to each other because they're still mad about some theory of race that's critical. It is insane stuff. And then look, then we don't hold people accountable. And I look at this story with Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin. I don't live in Wisconsin, and I'm flipping mad that this Oshkosh Defense Company got this multi-billion-dollar contract to build a large number of vehicles for the Postal Service. And the first thing that they go and do is they're looking to South Carolina to be able to look for cheap, exploitable labor. And you've got the senator there saying, well, I'm okay with it because, we've got enough jobs here. Quote, it's not like we don't have enough jobs here in Wisconsin. He says the biggest problem is we have in Wisconsin right now is employers not being able to find enough workers. You go, no, we don't have a worker problem. We got a wage problem. And when you take a good job like this one that would be at this Oshkosh Defense, a unionized company that pays really good wages and has good benefits and good retirement and all that stuff. These are family-sustaining, high-quality jobs that our government gave to this company because of their past and because they could produce it. Then go, no, we're going to move to South Carolina where we're going to cheat the workers, and we're going to pocket the difference. That's not what this administration was moving for. And this is the one thing that I really like about the Biden administration. If we're going to be building and rebuilding and bringing back manufacturing, he's saying we've got to do it in conditions that raise living standards, that give families security. But I look at this Ron Johnson thing. It's kind of like, he's bringing home the bacon, only letting the neighbor kids eat it. I mean, that's what's going on here. And people of Wisconsin, this has got to be this year's election issue. Because clearly this guy doesn't care about you and the jobs that you and your families need at all. If it were me and there were a senator from Pennsylvania who came and said, we got a whole bunch of money and we're bringing all these jobs. Oh, but hey, by the way, they decided to go to a cheaper non-union state, the least unionized state in the country, to seek cheap, exploitable labor. I would have an incredible problem with that. And I'm hoping the voters in Wisconsin do as well. And I'm hoping the Biden administration goes back and looks at this. Because this Build Back Better doesn't mean build back cheaper. It means build back better, where we raise opportunities for people. Just my thoughts. Appreciate the call, Eric. Going to take a quick break, right back. If you missed any of the program thus far, thericksmithshow.com is where you get the podcast. Take the show on the go anywhere. Also, get the app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1981. That was the day at least 8 workers at the Sequoia 1 nuclear reactor in Tennessee were exposed to radioactive coolant. The reactor was part of the vast Tennessee Valley Authority that provided electrical power to the region. Sequoia 1 had just been commissioned and was already off to a bad start. First, on January 19th, 1981, a generator tube malfunctioned, forcing a complete shutdown. Then, on this day, an operator's error triggered an emergency alert. An auxiliary unit operator was working his first day on the new job without proper training. He inadvertently opened the wrong valve during a safety test. The operator misunderstood his instructions and recognized his mistake immediately. But when he tried to alert the control room, they were too busy responding to the developing crisis to answer his call. Reactor water sprayed for 10 minutes before it was finally shut off. As many as 14 workers were contaminated by the coolant. Some scientists contend that the release of reactor vessel water was inadvertent and part of the design of the cooling system. Others argue that, in order to cut costs, management had decided to use radioactively contaminated water as emergency coolant rather than the more expensive, fresh, uncontaminated water. Steam leaks, tube malfunctions, and overflowing drainage tanks were just some of the reported failures at the plant in the following years. Between 1985 and 1988, Sequoia was forced to shut down again after an independent review concluded that the plant did not comply with current safety standards. Today, the plant supplies electricity to more than 1.3 million homes. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I think Ohio is showing the rest of the country how we should never let politicians deal with drawing the maps. This is exactly what happens when you give you give somebody who has all the power, and then tells them you should share. Yeah, it never happens. Now, if my wife were involved in this, and how we always dealt with things with our kids is, if we were splitting something in half, the two kids one would cut it, and the other one would get to decide which one they wanted. Seemed very fair. Can't do that here though, because you could easily draw these maps to ensure that you win all of them, and what choice do you then have? Now this could get really ugly because as time goes on, and the status quo, I think benefits Republicans in this. The longer they can hold this off, the better positioned they are to hold on to power. Which is why, again, they're doing this. And here to explain exactly what happened, how we got here, and where this mess is going to take us, I've asked Susan Tebben to come talk with us. Susan's a reporter over at the Ohio Capital Journal, ohiocapitaljournal.com, their website. Susan, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for minimizing this and saying it hasn't gotten ugly yet, because it's already ugly.
Absolutely. You are correct. It is already, but it could get even uglier because the primaries are coming fast and furious. From what I understand, a lot of people don't know which districts are going to be where, and they don't even have candidates for those districts, especially for the Democrats. So Republicans, they're playing this close to the vest because I think they hold the cards.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, we just had some discussions today. Democrats and Republicans are talking about whether or not Republicans will hold the, maps and see if they can wait out the process, because we've got our early voting starts in April, and we've got absentee ballots for the federals that have to be the federal, overseas uniformed citizens has to go out in March. So we've got deadlines coming up, and Republicans want to hold on to the maps that they had to try to keep those for at least the primaries. They actually asked the Supreme Court to do that. Supreme Court said they weren't going to do that, but that the General Assembly has the power to change. If the primaries want to get changed, they can change them. And since we have a supermajority, that would be the Republicans.
So how would the primary work? You go, okay, we're going to hold the primaries like we have in the old maps, but then when we get the new ones, we're going to then, just run. What happens if we just deliberately have some people who are drawn out of their districts? What then? I mean, this sounds like a lot of chaos.
It is an enormous amount of chaos, and there's a lot of unanswered questions. Even now, we have the Ohio Redistricting Commission has until the 17th to come up with new legislative maps. So that would be the House and Senate maps. And then they are going to have, starting on Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, go Bengals, they're going to have another 30 days to come up with the congressionals. So there's a lot of timelines that are going to bust through as we're going through this. But congressionals, you have a little bit more time, but we have to figure out this legislative stuff. But no one knows exactly. I mean, someone knows, obviously, but we're not talking about, what exactly we do. The Senate President, Matt Huffman, is talking about maybe we could have 2 primaries and have one when we have it on May 3rd and have another some other day. We're not sure. Secretary of State, boards of elections say that's very expensive. That's a logistical nightmare. I don't know how that would work. So, there's a lot of unanswered questions. There are a lot of things that still have to be figured out while we still have to figure out what the maps will be in the first place.
Yeah. And it's hard enough to get people to come out to vote once, let alone twice for the same thing. But
Right.
now Ohio's, like a lot of states, they don't want the voters don't want gerrymandered maps. I don't think they want this. I don't think when they voted back in 15 and 18 for change, I don't think this was the change that they were envisioning. Or am I missing something?
No, I don't think so either, and no, neither does anybody else. Honestly, the anti-gerrymandering groups, of course, say no. This is not what we wanted. Number one, we wanted a transparency process. They haven't had public hearings on these since the initial maps. I believe they had a few. When we're talking about congressionals and legislative, the legislative maps probably got more public hearings than the others, but we haven't had since the Ohio Supreme Court got involved. It's been a lot of hurry up and get this done, submit back to the Supreme Court, they'll reject it, hurry up and get this done. So we're not sure how much public input there's going to be towards the end of this, or how long this is going to go before the courts say either we take it over or, what the next steps will be. But the public input is the part that everybody's kind of angry about, is we didn't get enough time to look at these maps because they would give them 24 hours at most to look at these maps. And, that's not enough time to even write testimony, let alone travel to the State House from wherever you're coming in the state and say your piece at the same time. So that's the biggest thing. Transparency and public accountability has been lacking in this process.
And all of this is by design. I mean, because if I remember, didn't the Republicans hold this until like the very last second? Wasn't this like one of those 11th hour? Oh, here you go. We got our assignment in, but you don't really have time to grade it. We'll do it over a holiday weekend, so we know you're really not going to look at it, hoping to throw a fastball by somebody.
Right. It's something we've seen with the budget, something we've seen with education policy in the state. Well, after midnight for the first one, and then even the last revised legislation we had it before the deadline, but it was still the same day as the deadline, so there wasn't a whole lot of turnaround on this. So yeah, you're seeing a lot of that, and partially it is they can't get agreement. The Democrats and the Republicans do not agree on what needs to happen, and it's by and large it is a complicated process. The article of the Constitution that was approved in 2015, 2018 spells out a lot of ways, a lot of different things that you have to do to prove this. And clearly the court is saying you have to fulfill all of these different provisions of the Constitution while drawing maps that are compact, while drawing maps that are, representative, that kind of thing. But, it's a hard process, but it's also harder when you've started it 2 days before, or you've at least publicly started it 2 days before. And, with the census delays, they keep using the argument of census delays set us back to start with and snowballed this whole thing.
Yeah. Now, the guy who's now the Senate president, this Matt Huffman, as I understand, he's claiming that the Supreme Court, the Ohio Supreme Court, is not reading the constitutional amendment on this redistricting in the proper way. And his argument, I kind of like his argument. He goes, I should know because basically I wrote it. So yeah. I wrote it, and what my intention is what it should be, is how I'm reading this. Right. Is that how you getting it?
Yeah, no, that's what he said. He wrote it. He drafted it. He obviously wasn't alone, but he is the leadership. So he's going to say he wrote it, he drafted it, he negotiated it, he did all that. So what he's saying is there's a certain provision in it that's proportionality of the state that he's saying comes after all the rest of the stuff. So you figure out the maps, you figure out the statewide elections, you do all that stuff, and then you figure out the proportionality, where he's saying the court is saying you have to do all those things in conjunction. But he should know because he wrote it.
Yeah. This is why, again, the more we're talking about this, the more I go, this shouldn't be in the hands of the people who are directly affected by it. These shouldn't be in the hands of it'd be like the players of a game going, I think we're going to change the rules right now. Yeah. That doesn't happen usually. which is why I think we need to have an outside body. I don't know how that would look. I don't know where you would go with that. Some states have commissions, like you guys have this, this commission set up, this Ohio Redistricting Commission. But even this is political, and from what I understand, heavily weighted toward Republicans anyway. So they've even got the advantage in that.
Yeah, no, it's the dependent on the majority and its elected officials. So you've got the governor on that, who's a Republican. You've got the auditor on it, who's a Republican. You've got the Secretary of State, who's a Republican. The Senate President, who's a Republican. The House Speaker, who's a Republican, plus 2 Democrats. So that's the way it was written into the Constitution. But you do, as you say, this independent commission was interrogated by the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. She said, what do we do in the oral arguments for these maps? What happens? Can we get an independent commission? Can we do this a different way? And basically, I guess the answer from the Republicans, at least, was no. Yeah. And she could only speak one voice on the Supreme Court. So
I think I think the right way forward is we randomly, like in a lottery system, we choose an elementary school in a lottery system, and we take the 3rd grade class in that the highest grade average 3rd grade class, and we let them do it, because I can't imagine it would be any more messed up than we are right now.
Yeah, at the very least, the behavior would probably be the same. So.
That is an excellent point. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Susan Tebben. Susan is a reporter over at the Ohio Capital Journal. OhioCapitalJournal.com is their website if you want to check out her fantastic work. She's been following this redistricting from the beginning. If you're just now joining us, we're talking about redistricting there in Ohio and how just boogered up that whole process has been. If you missed any of it, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com or any place where you get your podcast. But, Susan, I keep coming back to this, and I go, it seems like the people who tell us that they're fiscally responsible, that they're, the believers in good government are the ones who booger it up the most. And I also have this thought in my head, and these are the people who tell me that government can't work. These are the very people who campaign on how bad government is, and then they do this. Then they prove it.
Mm-hmm. Well, if everyone would just listen to them, we would have no problems whatsoever, I think is how we're seeing it now. So you're seeing a lot of that, and it's supposed to be small government and all that. But that just the way the process is played out is not the way the process was spelled out in the Constitution. It's just been pretty much exactly as we saw it before in the last redistricting process, when it went to it. They haven't gone to a secret bunker. They haven't been in a hotel room secretly doing this, but it hasn't been, out in the open either. So, there's a lot of similarities that people are seeing to this process, to the last process, which is what they were trying to change in the first place.
Before we move on, I got to get your thoughts on how insane your Senate race is. Before we move on to that, is there any hope in this? Do you see at some point an adult stepping in, like maybe the court's going, yeah, we tried this. We're going to draw the maps, and these are them, and it's over, move on. Do you see anything like that happening?
There is there's been discussion of the Ohio Supreme Court putting in a special master commissioner to do this, but that's never been done before. But also, we've never had this much trouble, I don't think, with this. So there's plenty of tossed up ideas as to how we fix this, and that was one of them. So we'll see if that, if they have until the 17th, and then they have until the middle of March to get these congressional maps done. So after that, we'll see, if I can't imagine they give them another chance, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at your Senate race. I'm looking at basically all of your races in Ohio right now seem to be really crazy. I mean, the Senate race with Trump and his fixation on that crazy little, I forget what his name is, Cousin Josh. It's all I know him by, because a friend of mine is somehow related to him. But Cousin Josh and his insanity, and still trying to kiss Trump's behind, even though Trump gave him the boot at a fundraiser. And now you've got the My Pillow guy jumping into your state, as if you didn't have enough insanity. His craziness is coming on while he's not trying to hack Sean Hannity's show to put out his election stuff. Now he's made an endorsement for someone there in your state.
Yeah, I can't really give you the psychology on that one, but Mike Gibbons is actually he's he's pushing hard for it, and he's doing pretty well. Some people think that he's going to get the Trump endorsement over Josh Mandel. Josh Mandel's been a bit of a thorn in Trump's side, I think, and he's gone a little off the deep end, I think, but that's, not for me to say. But the thing about this Senate race is it's so thick, and I think that's going to be helpful, or not helpful for any of the candidates, because you're going to have such a spread out voter, saturation. But yeah, Mike Gibbons is, I think, one of the leaders right now, but surprising for some people, J.D. Vance doesn't seem to be making any traction.
Yeah, he seems to be plummeting. In fact, I was just reading his story. What was the precipitous decline? It was the phrase used about his campaign. And you go, yeah, because I follow his stuff on Twitter. I know who he is. And it's just not catching. He's trying to be a little Trump, and he just doesn't have the charisma.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I want to go to your governor's race now, because you've got this Jim Renacci, I guess his name is, former congressman.
Yeah.
He's now got the My Pillow guy endorsement.
He has, yes.
Is that what you want to take in public?
I have no idea. It's kind of funny, actually, because there was supposed to be a My Pillow franchise in Ohio, down the road in Clintonville, in the neighborhood of Clintonville, and it's closing. So I'm not sure why My Pillow is so excited about Ohio, but I guess that's his purview. I don't know. But yeah, Jim Renacci, that's another, if the Republicans start thickening that field, I think the governor is going to feel good about that, because as you see, usually incumbents do pretty well if there's a thick field below them, just fighting over the last of the votes.
Yeah, I mean, your governor, I'm not overly a fan of him, but he hasn't been absolutely horrible. I mean, this is another example of the far right eating the right.
Right. Yeah. And what we've seen from DeWine is sort of, when the pandemic started, he seemed to be taking a lead, and he seemed to be doing, things to try to be thoughtful about, how we were going to get through this thing. And then it sort of seemed to dip down to, I need to, I have a election coming up, and I have people that I need to please. And it sort of seemed like he was going back to, listening to the Republican supermajority that was in power, and, trying to do that. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts him in this election.
Yeah, this is why elections are fun. You get to see all the craziness play itself out. So last question, I want to go back to the maps for a second. Over the next couple of days, I know Super Bowl Sunday is a big day, a deadline there. When do you think they finally pull the plug and go, you know what? The adults have to come in the room and deal with this. Do you see it happening at all?
I don't know. I feel like we have to go through another cycle of this. I mean, obviously the Supreme Court has set some deadlines. We're definitely not going to see the legislature do this. We're going to see the Ohio Redistricting Commission take both of these maps, because they've already said we can't do legislative. We don't have the support that we need to get this emergency clause in for the election to be able to do this stuff. So we're just going to set it to the Redistricting Commission. And so legislative, definitely, I think they're going to get at least one more shot on it. And congressional, I think they'll let them go until the mid-March deadline. After that, we'll see. There's something that's got to give at some point.
Yeah, at some point, and this is where, for me, it's an interesting, situation, because, Republicans are the party of, government doesn't work. We shouldn't be surprised when it doesn't work. And then again, they show and prove us to this. But at some point, don't those voters have to go, I just want stuff to work. I don't want to have to fight over this all the time. You just do your freaking jobs. Crazy stuff. Susan, I appreciate the time, though. Great talking with you. As always, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Our good friend Susan Tebben. She's a reporter there at the Ohio Capital Journal, ohiocapitaljournal.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, download the podcast there at the website and wherever you get your podcasts. Quick break, right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. That was the day that workers in Oxnard, California, took a united stand and showed the power of solidarity. Oxnard was a California boom town. The American Beet Sugar Company, owned by the Oxnard brothers, drew hundreds of workers to the area. These new arrivals included Mexican and Chinese agricultural workers who faced hostility from local white residents. The managers at Oxnard exploited this interracial tension. They intentionally exacerbated conflicts between the groups of workers in an effort to keep wages low. This animosity heightened even further when the federal government passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, severely restricting Chinese immigration to the United States. As the number of Chinese workers at the factory fell, the company recruited Japanese workers to take their place. They wanted to continue to divide and exploit their workforce. They required their employees to shop at a company store. They also paid their recruits less than was originally promised. But the company had miscalculated. The workers were fed up with these tactics. 500 Japanese workers and 200 Mexican workers walked off the job. Soon, the number of striking workers had grown to more than 1,000. One Mexican worker was killed during the work action, and 4 other strikers were injured. But the workers stood strong together. The company eventually caved to the demands of the workers. The victorious workers then applied for union affiliation with the American Federation of Labor. But the AFL refused to admit the new local because it included Japanese workers. It would take a few more decades before the lesson of solidarity taught in Oxnard, California, would begin to be embraced by the U.S. labor movement. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this week, Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf, his final State of the State address, he came out and gave his budget address. And in his budget, and look, the one thing that I can say about Governor Wolf is education funding has always been at the front. I mean, he said he was going to be an education governor, and he, to his credit, I do believe has really tried. This budget, this one a pretty big one, talking about funding, basic, K through 12, increase that by a substantial amount, but also talking about, the state-owned universities that are under attack by the folks who have been wanting for a while to destroy it. The words generational investment come up. And to me, it's that kind of thinking that we have to have going forward. Look, you look at the Republican states across this country. What are they doing? They're slashing and burning. They're attacking their teachers, doing everything they can do, to privatize, profitize, and destroy public education. Fortunately for now, Pennsylvania has a governor that is going to put a stop to that stuff. And here to share some thoughts on the governor's address, I've asked Arthur Steinberg to come talk with us. Arthur's the president of AFT-Pennsylvania, the American Federation of Teachers here in Pennsylvania. Arthur, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me, Rick. I appreciate the opportunity.
So I saw the governor's address. I saw the budget address. I saw some of the proposals coming out. It looks like, and maybe you're going to correct me, but looks like massive investments in education going forward, even bigger than I probably thought he was going to be willing to go.
So, listen, Rick, I agree with you. It's really historic. I mean, there's putting $1.5 billion into basic education, which gives us the opportunity to deal with the chronic disinvestment, which has created really an educational system that denies all the pupils in Pennsylvania their constitutional right to a thorough and efficient system of education. And I'm glad you pointed out something about the higher ed. Higher ed funding, a little known fact is Pennsylvania is 49th in the nation in support for public education. Community college funding itself has been flat for the last few years, and the addition of the $200 million for the Nellie Bly Scholarship Fund, specifically to be used for the state education system and community college systems, will probably help back them up.
No, I mean,
so I think that is a very welcome addition to the budget.
It's like a lot of things. I look at President Biden's Build Back Better plan. I'm looking at the governor's plan here on education. And I've been saying, what we're seeing is kind of a reset of bad policy from the past. And this education money, takes me back to 2010 when then Governor, 2011, when then Governor Tom Corbett came and said, hey, we're gonna slash $1 billion from education. So for me, this looks like just a reset of where we should have been all along. And not really the transformational investment that we need, but really just a reset.
It gets us back to a point where we can at least give our kids a fighting chance. I mean, as I'm sure, your listeners probably know, at least intrinsically, there's an adequacy gap in Pennsylvania. There was a study done. This helps address, there's a $4.6 billion adequacy gap in education funding in Pennsylvania. And what that basically means is they calculate how much each school would need to be able to provide basic adequate skills for the students. And to bring all the schools in the Commonwealth up to par, it would require $4.6 billion. So this gets us on a start towards that. It deals with kids in poverty, kids with disability. It modifies the special education formula, and it at least gives them all a chance to then move on to these higher ed facilities, which they're funding as well.
Now, as I understand it, and again, you're the expert on this, from what the governor is proposing, that all of the money that he's talking about investing, this generational investment that he's talking about, is supposed to be running through the state system's fair funding formula to help rural and urban districts.
Right, and poor, right? That takes into account factors like poverty, English language learners, and kids with disabilities, and factors that when they fund the school district. And as you know now, only new money goes through it. The governor is proposing to put all of this through it, which will tend to put districts on an equal footing. He also last year implemented level up funding for the 100 poorest districts and put $300 million into that then. Now, one of the things I'd like to see, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but we would like to see the number of schools that qualify for level up be increased, because due to the years of the chronic underfunding, we have many, many school districts, both rural and urban, through all four corners of the Commonwealth, that are really, really suffering from this and could use that shot in the arm.
No, I think it's important what you said there, rural and urban, both of them, because it's often when you talk about education funding and you get into the right, left, Democrat, Republican, you get into that stuff. It's always the rural against the urban, because that's how we're supposed to be against each other. This helps both. This is an investment in rural communities just as much as it is in urban areas. Correct?
Absolutely, and just to put it in perspective a little bit, we're talking about $1.5 billion, which again would be epic. Coincidentally, that is the same amount that they expect to have a surplus of tax revenues in. Now, that's just tax revenues this year. That's at $1.5 billion and growing right now. So this would fund it all and require no tax increase. That doesn't take into account the $3 billion in unspent stimulus money. So by the end of June, estimates are that the state will have a surplus of cash reserve is anywhere between $11.2 and $11.8 million. So there's no excuse not to do this now. In fact, as I said, I'd like to even see a little more, but this would be a tremendous boon for the entire Commonwealth.
How much would the surplus be? Would it be million or billion?
Billion with a B.
Okay, because you said million. I'm going, 11 million doesn't sound that much.
Oh, I meant to say billion.
Yeah, because I want to make sure that gets home, because the first thing I know people are going to say, and you hear this anytime you talk about investing in anything, infrastructure, education, healthcare, whatever, is we're broke. Hey, the country's in debt. We're broke. We can't afford it. We're taxed enough already. You've heard all the lines, but the money's there, right?
It's absolutely there. Again, just the tax surplus alone this year funds that, and the surplus that they'll have in their coffers at the end of the year is let me make it clear then, it was 11.2 to 11.8 billion with a B dollars. That's after funding all of this. So there's no excuse or no reason not to do this.
Yeah, I mean, because you hear that line all across the country. We'd love to do those nice things like give poor kids in rural communities and poor kids in urban communities in education. We'd love to, but just can't find the money in the couch cushions.
And Rick, let me interrupt you there. it's not nice things. They're necessities. They're things that they should have. No kid's education should be determined by his zip code and where he lives. And every child deserves an opportunity to have a top-notch, world-class education so that they can then move on to good middle-class or upper-middle-class jobs.
I couldn't agree with you more, because I was a kid who grew up in a poor neighborhood. I grew up in one of those places where the school was underfunded, and I grew up in one of those places where back in the 70s when I was a kid, they sent you 2.5 hours away because we were busing kids all over the city of Cleveland to try and find some kind of mix to make everyone happy, and the resources were terrible, and the education suffered because of it. For me, if we'd have spent money on resources and done those things, it probably would have been better off. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Arthur Steinberg. Arthur is the president of the American Federation of Teachers here in Pennsylvania, AFT-PA. Their website. We'll get links out on the web, on our social media on how you can check out the work that they do. Now, I want to shift a little bit because, we're seeing nationally all this assault, on education. Ever since that theory, something about some critical theory, ever since that came on board, boy, we've had parents really, really involved in education and a lot of legislative moves towards, attacking teachers. And I point to Oklahoma as probably the most bizarre, where evidently their senator there wants to be able to sue teachers for anything that offends me in my sincerely held belief from any topic, and massive fines, banning teachers from teaching, all kinds of horrible stuff. In a state that only gets 1 out of 5 kids ready for college, this is the way that they're going. Now, Pennsylvania, I know, has the same kind of stuff because this is a national strategy, but I'm curious your thoughts on this overall gag kind of thing that's going on.
We have been in favor, for as long as I can remember, of teaching honest history. And if some of it is unpleasant, we all need to know that so we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. This is purely an attempt to keep the country divided and to chill any discussion of past unpleasant history that people need to know. We will not tolerate or support any bills that ban any honest discourse or discussion. Education itself is presenting ideas and facts from the past. I mean, listen, Rick, I was a history major. And going through some of these things you see now, there are a number of these awful massacres that occurred, like in Florida and the one in Tulsa, that I never learned about in school.
Yep.
Well, those are things that people need to know. You've denied people knowledge about their heritage, and it helps to continue the divide among people.
Yeah, but you hear them saying, well, it's going to make people feel bad. And I'm going, no, it doesn't make me feel bad or responsible. It makes me want to learn what happened so that I, as you said a moment ago, we don't make the same mistakes. That's why history is so important.
That's right. We want to move towards a more just and equitable society for all of our students, all of the members of society. And and again, it's purely the right has grabbed onto it and is labeling it things that it's not. Like critical race theory itself is a college level course. It's taught mostly in upper level universities or law schools, and it's just that a theory that is not taught in any elementary school or public high school in the country.
Yeah, I mean, but again, it's about scaring people. It's about keeping people at the bottom.
And it's been labeled, right?
And had they been had my generation and other past generations learned this history, they wouldn't be so afraid of it. That's the weird thing. If it's me, I'm angry because I didn't get the opportunity to learn this stuff. I'm angry that somehow I was lied to. That's what gets me. That's what I think we should be angry about.
Well, sure, and it leads you to wonder what else people are being lied to about. And listen, I'm also disappointed in it. The fact is that it could have really influenced the way I maybe acted in the rest of my life or my career. Everybody should have a truthful, honest picture of what has occurred, and I actually find it disgusting.
Yeah. No, I'm looking at this group, PEN America. They have been tracking all of these gag order bills. In fact, they pointed out that since January of 21, there have been 122 educational gag order bills that have been put in legislatures across the country in 33 different states. Here in Pennsylvania, I'm sure there's one, and I hope you're going to be able to tell me about them. But 12 of these gag order laws have passed in 10 different states, and have become law. And this is concerning.
You talked about Oklahoma. Texas, they had a school district where a state senator said, we have to teach the other side of the Holocaust. Well, there's no other side of the Holocaust. Right? It's just facts about what occurred. We did have one bill pass the legislature here in Pennsylvania, which the governor said he would veto. I'm sure more will come up in this next legislative session, and we will be very vigilant about calling it to the public's attention and letting the legislators know how we feel about it.
Yeah, but here's my question with this, and this is where this kind of comes to it. Whoever dreamt that up here in Pennsylvania, whoever the legislator was, he didn't sit on his kitchen table and write this out. It's my view that this is a well-funded, well-organized, well-planned attack on public education to destroy public education as a whole, and using this as a vehicle to make teachers leave the profession at a faster rate than they already are. And look, I was driving in the car the other day. I talked about this on the show the other day. And the news, one of those, hey, breaking news, Pennsylvania's teachers are leaving the classroom. How are we going to teach our kids? How are we going to staff classrooms? Solutions at 5. And you go, no, we know what your bad solutions are. Keep attacking teachers so you can profitize and decide who gets what education. We already know the gig. It's just getting there.
Rick, and also the movement you're talking about is it is a national movement, nationally funded and nationally coordinated, and it is really an attempt to play to the public purely for political purposes. No thoughts whatsoever about the truth. They know it's a hot button issue, and what really our mission on that is to educate people, parents in the community, so they see what these bills are really about.
Yep.
I'm confident when we have that opportunity to present it to people that they then see that we're on the right side of it.
This is where I want to finish up.
We're spending a lot of money doing that.
This is where I want to finish this segment up, because ultimately it's going to come down to the silent majority, those of us who love our kids' teachers, respect the work that they do and honor the work that they do, who have been silent for too long while these lunatics have been cramming themselves into school board meetings, attacking those teachers. Ultimately, it's got to come down to us saying enough of this already and defending those teachers.
No, I agree. That goes back to what I just said before about educating people, and for once we do that, for then parents and community members to get involved at their local level and run for these school board seats. One of the things they've done is made it so unpleasant and so frightening for people that they just stay away from it.
Yeah. No, it's something we most certainly have to do. And look, as you roll this out, we'd love to have you back and tell us what's going on, keep us informed on all of the craziness going through our General Assembly, and hopefully educate people come election time so we can throw some of these bums out. But Arthur, I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Rick. Will do.
Good stuff. As always, our good friend Arthur Steinberg, president of the American Federation of Teachers here in Pennsylvania, AFT. Love to hear your thoughts. Are you willing to get involved? Are you willing to jump into this? I got to tell you, I think parents have got to get really, really upset about what's going on in their kids' schools with this kind of insanity, because I want my kids to learn actual history, like we did back in 2015 when we did our civil rights tour. But, it is what it is, and we've got to move forward. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Be sure to follow us on social media, Twitter @RickSmithShow, Facebook, YouTube. Like, subscribe, share. And if you do download the podcast, when you do download the podcast, by all means, give us that 5-star rating. Leave a comment. We will get back with you. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith.
In this horrible time of economic collapse, It is truly touching to see so many corporate chieftains reaching out in solidarity with a hard-hit working class. We know they're doing this because they keep telling us they are. Practically every brand-name giant has been spending millions of dollars on PR campaigns in recent weeks, asserting that they're standing with us, declaring over and over, "We're all in this together." Except, of course, they're really not standing anywhere near us. While we're waiting in endless lines at food banks and unemployment offices, the elites are still getting fat paychecks and platinum-level health care. The severity and gross disparity of our country's present economic collapse is not simply caused by a sudden viral outbreak, but by a decades-long plutocratic policy of intentionally maximizing profits for the rich and minimizing everyone else's well-being. As the eminent economist Joseph Stiglitz rightly put it, we built an economy with no shock absorbers. Jobs, once the measure of a family's economic security, have steadily been shriveled to low-wage, unreliable work, untethered to a fair share, or any share, of the new wealth that workers create. In a relentless push for exorbitant short-term profits, today's executives have abandoned any pretense that a corporation is a community of interdependent interests striving to advance the common good. Instead, while the honchos are richly covered, they're washing their hands of any responsibility for the health, retirement, and other essential needs of their workforce. Rely on food stamps and other publicly funded programs, they say, even as their lobbyists and for-sale lawmakers slash the public safety net. This is Jim Hightower saying these forces of American greed have shoved millions of working families to the economic precipice, and all it takes is a virus to push them over.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org. Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the
Takes is a virus to push them over.
Ba, 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 da, da, da. Testing 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Test. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Schlemiel. Schlemazel. I wonder if you could hear that. I wonder if you can hear that. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rick Smith Show podcast. It is Black History Month, and we are taking this opportunity to go back into the archives, dig way back deep, all the way back to 2015, when we did our civil rights tour, traipsing across the southern U.S., looking for labor's involvement in the civil rights movement, and also an family educational opportunity. Came across some amazing people, and for all of the people during that trip who made it possible, who educated us, who shared their stories, who shared their passion, their glory, who shared their life's work, thank you. To the folks who have been sending me email going, okay, you're replaying old interviews. What's new about that? It is Black History Month. So going back and telling some of these stories and letting people do that in their own words, kind of the goal here. I'm not throwing a lot of commentary in this, so I've taken some shots of that, going, wow, you're not really doing history. No, we're letting people tell their stories. I don't want to get into the middle of it. I want it to be completely unvarnished to get people's stories. And today, one of the first places we stopped was Greensboro, North Carolina. It was the first full stop of the tour. The first actual stop was in historic Stagville. Oh, you can't leave that. You said Fagville. No. Hello, and welcome back to the Rick Smith Show podcast, where we are digging deep into the archives to look back to 2015 and our civil rights tour. So far, everyone pretty happy with what we've put forth. A couple of folks not quite understanding the purpose of this. I thought I've explained, back in 2015, we did a civil rights tour where we traipsed across the entire southern U.S. in search of labor's involvement in the civil rights era. But also it was because at the time, my young daughter had, in one of those conversations you have with your kids, what'd you do at school today? Oh, I learned about this. Oh, yeah, what'd you learn? You know how that goes. You've probably done it with parents, with your children, whatever. Well, one day, as we were having this conversation, what'd you learn? Oh, we learned about Rosa Parks. Oh, what'd you learn? She was tired. And that's where the conversation ended. And it was that abruptness that caught my attention. And it made me go, hey, maybe I need to do a better job of a little education around this. And hey, light bulb goes on. Good chance to get out of the studio, to get on the road, do some radio on the road. Go meet people. I love being out of the studio. I love getting out and hearing workers' stories. I love getting out and hearing people tell their life stories. We don't do enough of it. So today I'm going to spend a little time on Greensboro. Greensboro was supposed to be the official first stop of our civil rights tour, but on the way, as everyone, because our schedules were all screwed up, and my wife and the kids, they were to meet us in Greensboro, because again, that was the official first stop. On the way, we came across historic Stagville. And we decided, hey, we'll stay the night, and we'll set up an appointment in the morning, and we'll get in there, and we'll get that done real quick. And we ended up spending most of the day there. And then we'll soldier on and get down to Greensboro, which wasn't too much further down the road, but still, we were on the way, we stopped, but Greensboro was supposed to be the first official stop, because I thought it was one of those things that there was that story of the 4 students, the A&T, the North Carolina A&T students, who through nonviolent action actually won something. They didn't just take a beating and get spit on and abused for nothing. Things actually began to change. And I thought it was a great way to start. And also, they've got, a couple of, pretty incredible things there. The actual lunch counter has been preserved the way it was, back then. The museum that they have there is fantastic. In fact, it was one of those things where right from the start, it made me think, wow, I don't know how you can top this. And what I found is, as the tour progressed, as we went on further down the line, there were a lot of these museums and a lot of these civil rights institutes and a lot of these nonprofits, these organizations keeping this history alive. Now you could say, oh, it's all just all for tourism, and yeah, it is. It's it's to bring people in, and there's business activity to come around with that, and that's fine. But it's also to keep the history alive and to make people confront this, which is what I did back in 2015. So for the couple of people who have responded and said, hey, I love the interviews and stuff, but you're not really putting much work in here. The answer is, this isn't about me. This isn't about the show. This is why we're not replaying them on the show. This is why we're putting them out in podcasts, so people have the opportunity to hear these folks. Not about me. It has nothing to do with me. This is not my lane. I have never put these out like this before. But I thought in this moment, Black History Month, being right now, all of the idiocy around critical race theory, all the idiocy around, just history in general, I thought this was a perfect time to pull these out of the archives, to put them out and have people really be able to listen and hear. So this first interview, I'm going to start off with Lewis Brandon. His official title at the time when we interviewed him was Grassroots History Coordinator at the beloved Community Center. And he sat down with us, and he was there that day that the A&T 4 were at the lunch counter. He was there at that sit-in, so he was part of all of that. So for him to sit down and explain and walk us through was pretty special. So I want to play Lewis Brandon and his story first, and then we'll get into a little bit after that Rebecca Crease. She did a documentary titled February 1, the story of the Greensboro 4, which I found out later was kind of insulting because, the folks in Greensboro, because most of us think of it as the Greensboro 4, but the folks there are like, no. Greensboro should get no credit for this. It was the A&T 4, and I found that out later, and have corrected my language over this, and I get their rationale. You don't want the city of Greensboro to get credit for something that they did nothing to actually help, and I agree with that. And we'll hear from Rebecca on her documentary. Also, Claude Barnes, he's going to be here to talk with us. He's a researcher at the Jubilee Institute there in Greensboro. He's got a great story of how he was basically beaten and tear gassed because he won a write-in campaign for class president back in 1969. We'll share his story. But first, here's Lewis Brandon, grassroots history coordinator there at the beloved Community Center. What an incredible guy. I mean, when I sat down with him, we're talking a big guy. He was almost as big as I am. I think he may even been a little bit bigger than me. But the most gentle, soft-spoken guy you'd meet. And I appreciate him sharing his story with us. And I'd love to hear yours. What do you think about what Lewis had to say? What do you think about that moment? What do you think about putting yourself in that moment? It's pretty remarkable to me. I do now want to move on to Rebecca Crease and her documentary, February 1, the story of the Greensboro 4. I'm going to talk a little bit about the film, what it took to make it, all of that stuff. And on the other side, we're going to get to Claude Barnes. Like I said, that's the one you're going to want to hear that one too, because it's a fascinating story. But here is Rebecca Crease, director of the documentary February 1. Hope everybody checks out the February 1 documentary. I will put a link in the podcast notes on how you can find the documentary and check it out here during Black History Month. But I appreciate her sitting down and talking with us. This final interview, and this is the one that there are some that throughout this tour that are heartbreaking. There are some that are going to stick with me for as long as I live. And there are some that are just the person is what sticks with me. And the story, a great story in the rearview mirror. But this guy was just fantastic, and he was funny. And, the idea that you would run for class president on a write-in and then win and have the school say, no, can't have that. And actually it ended up being a riot. Now the weird part is, while we were on the road doing this, while we were doing these, I would go and I would record the interviews, and we would record them all times of the day and night. And then I would slap some music on both ends, so you had the bumpers to go in and out of your radio segments. I decided, as a joke, to play 3 Days Grace, Let's Start a Riot at the end of it. And I got people mad at me because they thought that I was mocking it. I'm going, no. I mean, the whole thing is ludicrous. And I guess the mocking would be, who in their right mind in a school district would go, no, we're not going to let you do this, and we're gonna tear gas people. I mean, it was ludicrous at the time, but I got to throw that out. I did take some what by putting the song Riot on the end of this. Anyway, before too long, I want to get to this interview with Claude Barnes, which I think is fantastic. Here's Claude Barnes. Still one of my favorite stories in a positive way. I mean, there are a lot of the stories here that are, just stick with you that are horrible and negative. And this one, this is a good dude, man. I really enjoyed spending time with him. And Claude, thank you so much for that. If you have any questions, comments, I would love to hear them. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any of the other podcasts in this series, just subscribe to our podcast on any of your podcast hosts or go to thericksmithshow.com, and we will make sure that there's a place for you to get all of the podcasts of our Black History Month. And like I said, look, this isn't my lane. And feel free to jump in on this. I've yet to have anybody really go at me and say, you don't belong here, which I think is fabulous. But, all's fair game. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Remember, follow us on social media at Rick Smith Show on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, like, subscribe, all of that stuff. Also, make sure you get the podcast. Subscribe to that so you never miss a moment. Thanks so much for being here. We will see you in the next podcast, which, you're not going to want to miss. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.